is called Setting the Scene. And what we did, we tried to select 4 important topics that are dealing with the impact of digitalization of the economy and the society. The first presentation will address what has been done in terms of regulatory framework, and in particular will focus to what is planned to do in coming years as far as concern the development and deployment of artificial intelligence solutions. The second one is more dealing with the Industry 4.0 and how the ICT can leverage the competitiveness of the companies. And then you have selected a couple of topics that are quite important. The first one is on the platform economy, and the second one on the data economy. Both are related, connected to the artificial intelligence subject, and as well they are connected to the competitiveness of the European industry. In the afternoon, after the lunch, we will go more in depth about what means digital transformations, and we have selected a couple of topics in which we try to give a little bit more information about, and we have selected 3 examples of what means digital transformation at the city level and industrial levels, and in a region like the Western Balkans. So I have the privilege to chair these sessions, and you see there were 4 speakers. Cécile, that is the Deputy Head of Unit of the Robotics and Artificial Intelligence Unit of the Director General for Communication Network Contact Technologies. And we have Valerio Alessandroni, that is the WATIFY ambassadors, and my colleague Nestor Duch Brown from the Joint Research Center, Digital Economy Unit, and last but not least, Daniel Castro for the Center of Data Innovation. So I will leave now to Cécile to start.
Thank you, Alessandro. Okay, thank you. Thank you for this invitation and to allow me to present you what we do at the Commission to try to help the use and the exploitation of the benefit from AI for everybody everywhere in Europe. Our unit is from DG Connect, and we are in charge of the robotics and AI. We are the central point for those aspects in the Commission. The outline of my talk is I would first present the potential benefits of AI, then what are the strengths of EU in this field, and what are the challenges for adoption of AI, and then what are our EU strategy to make the best of AI to everybody in all EU regions. So I'm talking to you guys. You have to get access to this technology and make the best of it. So we are trying our best to make it available to everybody. So what are the potential benefits? So for sure, with AI, you have a system which help people in their everyday life, be it at work or be it at home. So we see many of these examples, and there are many more to come. They also allow to find solutions to address societal challenge, like in the transport, in the healthcare, in environment preservation, and so on. So there are many, many advantages on those aspects as well. They also allow to produce better products and services, more personalized services, personalized products. So this is possible thanks to AI. Also in terms of improving the process in production to make companies more competitive. And this definitely, there is an economic benefit for everybody. And we want Europe to benefit from this economic benefit. So we want it to happen in Europe and not just to buy solutions from non-European. What are our strengths? We have many strengths. We are world leading in different aspects. So, for instance, in robotics, especially in the professional industrial service and service robotics, we're very strong, producing more than 1/4 of these kind of robots. We are also very good in industrial services such as transport, healthcare, and manufacturing, and most of those sectors can benefit from AI, so we need to help them being even better and stronger in adopting AI. We are also strong, maybe less strong in B2C, but in B2B we are very strong, and also thanks to the digital single market, which gives access to the whole European market, and also to allow to have similar regulation and so on. This really helps the European market, and we also have high potential of data. They are there and we need to exploit them. And finally, world-class researchers, labs, and startups. We see also these international companies building labs in Europe because they know that there is a richness of the research and scientific value in Europe. Now, what are the challenges? We have to stay at the forefront of research and technology, so we need to continue investing in our strengths. We need to provide access to data. There are plenty of data. We have to help to make them available to create new services, new products, and new economy. We have to have AI which is inclusive. So make sure that AI is not only available to every company, every user, but also usable for all. So we don't want to have a digital divide based on AI. And AI can actually be used to make it available for everybody, make it more personalized to the different needs. We also have a challenge to adapt to the evolution of the labor market and landscape, and we have a skill gap. We will see a bit more later. And we have challenges for acceptance and ethical issues, so we have to address those. Regarding when we have systems which are more and more autonomous, we have safety and liability issue. So where we have autonomous robots coming to help people, safety issues are of course a very important topic. And what happens if something goes wrong? Who is liable? So these are important things to address. And last but not least, we have excellent research, excellent technology, but in Europe the efforts are scattered as opposed to international competition, which is huge. So there we really need to join forces. Not any single country can compete at international level. We need to join forces at European level. So this is why we came up with this strategy for artificial intelligence in Europe. Where we want to join forces to lead the way. And it has three pillars. Number one, boosting the technology and industrial capacity and the uptake of AI in Europe. Second pillar, it's to prepare for the socio-economic changes, namely the change of the job landscapes and also adapting the skills to make sure that everybody is equipped with the right skills to use and develop the technology. And third one is to ensure that we have the right framework for ethical and legal aspect of AI. So we really want to have an integrative approach to address those three pillars at the same time. We need all of them to make sure that we will be in control of the technology to make the best of the technology for Europe and make sure that they respect our European values. Regarding the first pillar, so we want to increase by 70% our annual investment in AI to reach 1.5 billion over the next 3 years in Horizon 2020. And we will address different aspects of it, so continue funding basic and industrial research and deployment. We will have the AI on-demand platform. I will define a bit later, but it's basically bringing under the same umbrella all the capacity we have in Europe, giving access to all the knowledge and software we have regarding AI in Europe. Number three, network of digital innovation hub in AI, which means bringing the technology to the local actors. And we also want to strengthen in the AI Excellence Center. We heard that in the previous session. We want to help strengthening our excellence centers. And finally, help making accessible the industrial data. So we provide tools for that. I want, going again further on the data, the availability of data, in parallel to the AI communication, there has been a data package as well, which allows, provide mechanisms to help accessing different types of data, be it public sector information, so revision of the directive, help also access to scientific information, also another aspect is sharing private sector data, providing guidance to share it, including industrial data, which is very important for creating new economy. And finally, the digital transformation of health and care, there is also a communication about that, which helps to make health data set available as well. So that was the first pillar. Second pillar is preparing for socio-economic changes, and there we want, I will not go into the detail, but the important aspects are we want to understand what will be the changes and how to address them, how to be prepared in terms of providing the skills to the people, either retraining people for people which are at work and which will change the evolution of the job, will make it that they will need new skills to use the technology, or also get the fresh students to get in touch with the real, with the industry so that they get the digital skills, and also building some partnership between business and education, because it's a way to attract and retain the AI talent. It's not just a Balkan issue, this brain drain, it's a European issue, so we need to do something. And helping partnership between business and education is a way of helping that. And we also will improve the curricula, so the European EIT Institute will also enrich its curricula with AI. So the third pillar is about the ethical and legal framework. So first of the aspect is ethics guidelines. So there are many ethics principles and so on. What the goal of this one is to produce by the end of the year a guideline to help any user to know what does it mean for my company to implement such ethics guideline. And we want to do that in the context of a multi-stakeholder forum involving all the parties involved, important stakeholders in AI, being the academia, the industry, the civil society, to help us defining what we want in AI for Europe. And so they will define the guideline by the end of the year, and then we will have other aspects linked to product liability directive and safety framework. Another aspect, we will boost the research in explainable AI, which is very important to have transparent systems. And there is also a project pilot on algorithmic awareness building to investigate a bit the aspect of automatic decision making and the potential bias it could have and discrimination and so on. So this is very important to be aware of those aspects. So these were the three pillars in short. Now it's important to join forces at European level, and it's great to see the endorsement of most of the member states. So there's already 24 member states signed a cooperation declaration on AI, and the other member states have also given their support for that, so they are going to join very soon. Now, so that's the main strategy. How to make then the best of this strategy and AI in all regions. So I'm going to just quickly go about how to bring this knowledge, this data to your region. And as you know, our previous commissioner said that he wants to have at least one world-class digital innovation hub in every region in Europe. And the goal of those digital innovation hubs is to bring the technology, bring the expertise within working distance of any player in Europe, every company, small or large company, and also in the more traditional sectors. So how to make it happen? It's in building those network of digital innovation hubs. Of course, the region have an important role to play because it's local based, so it's building on their own ecosystem. And the EU is helping a lot with that, with a funding of $500 million on that in H2020. So it's usually built around a competence center, bringing together the local knowledge, the technical support, the infrastructure to test and validate the technology, testing facilities, access to users, access to finance. It's not only a technical problem, but also an access to finance. Training, it's where the skills, they play an important thing in developing the skills around this ecosystem, innovation, coaching, and so on. So these are the main elements of Digital Innovation Hub, which plays the role of a brokerage between users, suppliers, and investor at local level. But this is not enough, because not every region is specialized in everything. So you need to, each digital innovation hub is actually a hub to the local ecosystem, but also a link to all the other digital innovation in Europe. And it's only in joining forces that you can have access to all the different technology, all the different expertise you need to serve your customers, your companies in your local ecosystem. So this is currently the AI-related digital innovation hubs related to AI in Europe. You see, it's not evenly distributed, so there is still effort to make to develop new ones everywhere. In the Balkan region, there are already some, but more effort are needed, and we also have support in H2020 to develop that. So that was about Digital Innovation Hub. Now, in 2 words, the AI on-demand platform, what it is, as I said, the goal is to have a central access point to all the knowledge, all the tools and the resources we have in Europe regarding AI, to make it available to everyone, to offer solution and support to all users of AI, to integrate them in their application, product, and services. So it looks like that. So you have this, you bring under the same umbrella all the resources we have in Europe in terms of software, prototype, data, expertise. You build on that a service layer, so people knowing the technology and able to discuss and to talk to the user and tell them, okay, this is what the technology can do for you. And so this is a two-way direction process where you need to answer to the user need and you need to provide them with the right technology. So in conclusion, we have an inclusive strategy. We are addressing the different pillars, the different aspects of this of AI, and we provide you with a toolbox with the AI on-demand platform on the one hand, and to bring the knowledge, to give a single access point to the knowledge, and a network of digital innovation hubs, which is a distribution channel for AI to empower all local companies and users in Europe. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cécile. The question will be done at the end of all the presentation, because you will see that the 4 presentations are touching the same argument, so it would be better if you have questions, then you just keep in mind when we will finish the presentation. Now, it's my pleasure to present Valerio Alessandroni. You have slide or, yeah, no slide.
Good morning. First of all, let me apologize with the moderator. I was just in the wrong place. Somebody came to fetch me and took me here. I spent my professional life in industrial automation at several levels. And so I was not surprised when Tallinn Technical University called me for some course, asking me to make some lectures to their students. And this happened 7 years ago. In 2011, I was there for some lecture, and I am still there, but not full time. So I started to teach industrial automation, and I had the chance to appreciate this small country. Let me just give you some basic information. Estonia has nowadays about 1,003,000 inhabitants, so a little bit more than Milano, a little bit less than Rome. It's the smallest in Baltic states. Nevertheless, they have a very good infrastructure. Very good university. They have 3 universities. Very good communication framework, internet everywhere. You can be in the middle of the forest and you have the signal. They also have some excellence, like for instance in information technology. They were the inventors of Skype, and nowadays they are specialized mostly in cybersecurity. Estonia is one of the cybersecurity centers of NATO. As a country, Estonia has a very good vertical integration. From the top to the bottom, they are very integrated to each other. But in my opinion, there is not a very good horizontal integration. I will speak about this later. So let me go back to industrial automation. I was there when Angela Merkel visited Hannover Messe a few years ago, and first time this word Industry 4.0 came out, which is now the buzzword of everything. So I also switched towards Industry 4.0. It was very easy for me because I always work in basic technologies of Industry 4.0 that now I don't want to list, just to tell something, Internet of Things, cyber physical systems, and cloud computing, and so on. And I can tell you that my students are very interested in these arguments. And by the way, in the last few years, I have a group of master's students from different parts of the world. This year I had students from Pakistan, from Nigeria, from also somebody from the USA, because to study in Tallinn is attractive, and many people come there to spend some months or even some year. And so when I come to the point, what are you going to do next? Many of the students would like to follow this way of innovation, which we call Industry 4.0. And I see the dollar shining in their eyes. But when they ask me, what should we do now? We know something about Industry 4.0, industrial automation, which is the next step? My answer normally is, the next step is take it easy. Take it one moment. Your life is long. Don't run too much. Take 1 year, visit Europe, take one Erasmus program, visit other countries, read books, go to theater, visit other cultures, speak with new people, because an entrepreneur must have an open mind. We already spoke yesterday, for those of you that follow the WATIFY event. An open mind is a basic requirement for some entrepreneur who wants to work with new technologies. When you will be back and your mind will be open, then you will select the technology. But don't start with the technology, because technology is like the colors for an artist. First you must be an artist, and then you use the colors. But if you just buy the colors and you don't know nothing about how to paint a face or how to paint a landscape, you will have terrible results. And normally I add another thing. When you come back from this experience, please read a book that I consider a Bible, which is Blue Ocean. This book was written a few years ago, and it's very interesting because Blue Ocean analyzes the market, telling us that there are two possibilities when we want to become an entrepreneur and enter into the market in any sector. The first possibility is to jump in a red ocean, red like the blood, because the ocean is full of competitors. They try to kill each other. They try to compete on price, on factors that for a newcomer, for a startup, very often are difficult to handle. The second possibility is the blue ocean. Blue ocean means that the ocean is without competitors. You are alone. You have some months, because nowadays the world is running, but at least you have some months in which you can put your roots, demonstrate what you are able to do using the new technologies. And this book gives us some good example about this approach. One example is particularly suited to Estonia. Estonians like to go to circus, like it still happens in many Eastern Europe countries. There are many circus around. And so my question to the student is, would you open a circus, a new circus in Estonia if you were an entrepreneur? Somebody says, yes, because they like circus. Wrong answer. There are so many around. Somebody says, no, it's too expensive, it's not my business. Wrong answer. The right answer that I like is, I must think about, maybe. Because if you do it in the right way, it is possible to open circus in Estonia. It is even possible to come to sell wine in Italy. I can tell you about some Australian company which is selling wine in Italy, because they do it differently. They don't just come with bottles. They offer something, some service, some environment. And you like to go to these shops because you find somebody who knows wine, so you can ask, you can taste, you can read something about the wine. And so they had a great success. Coming back to the circus, the example that is shown in this book is Circus du Soleil. Circus du Soleil, if you think about, is a circus, but completely different from the circus that we know. They don't use animals. It's a question of lights, it's a question of art. And they are so good that they were even selected to open Expo in Milano 3 years ago. The final show was Circus du Soleil. So it is possible to find a blue ocean where you can jump in. And only in this moment you can select the right technologies that you need. Depends what you want to do. And so my students try to follow what I say. Somebody doesn't believe and just turn his head, but somebody is following these suggestions. You know, I am an engineer. I like to test, to measure directly. I don't believe what I read in books normally. And so I decided to jump into the game. I decided to open my own startup to see what happens. First of all, I had to find a blue ocean. And the blue ocean, if you think about automation and you think about Estonia, there are different possibilities. I selected Fieldbus technologies. Fieldbus technologies are everywhere because you need a Fieldbus to connect the equipment that you are going to use in a plant or even on board on a machine. But I discovered that Estonia, very strange to say, did not have a regular course at university about Fieldbus technologies. And every time they need a consultancy or they need to design something, they have to go abroad. I have seen, for instance, many Italian machines which are being used in the food and beverage industry in Estonia, which is very developed. And for these machines, every time the communication doesn't work, they have to call somebody from Italy, and so they have to spend a lot of money and so on. And I repeat, this is very strange because the first Fieldbus technologies in Europe, which were developing in Munich, saw the participation also of some Estonian professor. But for some reason, they did not believe in this technology anymore. And so that's why the company that with a partner we created is called Estonian Fieldbus Competency Center. Why Competency Center? Because Estonia is very small. Estonia doesn't have the resources to create some laboratory or some institute where you can develop Fieldbus technologies, but they are very good in selling brainware. And so, Competency Center about Fieldbus technologies. It was, as I said, it was a game because in Estonia it's very easy to open a new company. You do it in 2 hours. You don't even have to go out from your office or from your home. You do everything online. It's free. You just have to demonstrate that you have 2,500 euro on your account. When you demonstrated, this money comes back to you, so you don't have to stop the money, and you don't pay taxes until you distribute dividends. When you give dividends, you pay 20% on the dividends, and that's all. No taxes to notary, no taxes to manage the company, like unfortunately we had to do in Italy. In Italy, it's very difficult to open a startup because bureaucracy and taxes try to kill you every day. And I finish the last concept, because I believe in Industry 4.0 directly by myself. The first thing I tried to do was to create an ecosystem, because this is what really a startup needs, to be in an ecosystem. The vertical integration was very easy in EFCC because we are few people and we sell brainware. We don't have logistics, we don't have hardware to store somewhere and so on. But I created an ecosystem with other competency centers in Europe. So I am involved with Regensburg University, with Barcelona University, with Genova University. We exchange professors, we make courses in all these places, physically or via the web and so on. And my next step will be now to invest in technologies, because I need a platform to make e-learning. I need a platform to exchange experiences with other teachers or professors. So, you see, the 1st of January 2015, EFCC was created. But first we developed the idea, and only now we are looking for the right technologies. And this is my message. Don't start from technologies, but use technologies. Don't let the technologies use you, but you should use the technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we move to the next presentation from Nestor Duch Brown on the platform economy.
Thank you, Alessandro. And I would like to start by thanking the organization for inviting me to talk to you today, and also to the audience for being here and paying attention to what we have to say on the digital economy. I will talk about the platform economy, and I would take, let's say, a gradual approach to explain a little bit what we know about the platform economy and some of the consequences that this phenomenon of platformization, as it's called, could have for different economies, and particularly for Europe. So we know that so economies and societies are evolving things, and they evolve because of many things. There are social changes, social innovation, technological change, technological innovation, and all this brings about modifications in the structure of the economies and societies that we live in. So just as a token of example, I just collected this data, which shows that the past 10 years, there's been a deep transformation in the economy, where the share of value creation in different parts of the world has been deeply changing. And we can see that both the US and China are increasing their share in this value creation to the expense of the rest of the world, and particularly Europe. Okay, so we are basically losing a little bit of competitiveness. Another way to look at this is to check which are the sectors that are gaining a little bit of prominence, and which are the sectors that are losing prominence. And obviously this is highly and directly connected with the topic of this workshop on smart specialization. So if we bring this to the regional level, then we are talking about regional specialization, regional competitiveness, and how to cope with the changes in the concentration, specialization, and the structure of specialization in different countries, okay? So we can see that we have sectors that are showing an increase in penetration, like computer services, media, general retailers. Here we are talking about Amazon mostly. And there are obviously sectors declining, and we also observe sectors that appear in the top of the distribution in terms of value creation, and we also observe that sectors disappear from this distribution. So there are a lot of changes, and this is only 10 years. So these are the changes from the past 10 years. So there are many arguments, factors that might explain this. And one of the main factors that has been highlighted by academics policymakers is the phenomenon of platformization, the creation of platforms. So we can see, for instance, how the evolution of the platforms have been taking place in the past years, and how it's expected to grow in the coming years as well. Okay, so I would like first to make some clarifications, because when we talk about platforms, we might understand different things. Okay, so there are different concepts related to the platform. So we can understand platforms as a technology. Okay, an operating system is a platform where we can develop applications, processes, or technologies related to that particular platform. So we've been hearing about platforms constantly since yesterday, and everybody is thinking that they need a platform in order to, let's say, to acquire some competitiveness or solve some particular problem they have. So this is, so we have to make sure that which kind of platform we're talking about. Is it a technological platform or is a different platform? So there is also the business concept of a platform, which means basically it's a business model. So it's a way of doing things, it's a way of organizing the activities of the company that in principle facilitates the exchanges between different customers. And these customers are affiliated to the company somehow. Okay? And then we have a third concept of the platform, which is the economist's concept of the platform. It is related directly to what we know as a two-sided market. And a two-sided market is basically a market where we have an intermediary, and the intermediary is the platform. And the role of the intermediary is basically to create a mechanism which is super efficient in order to connect different potential users. And here, the role of the platform is basically solve a relative complex issue, which means match very heterogeneous preferences from the users that are located in the different sides of the platform. Okay? So in order to solve that, we need technology, because otherwise it's relatively complex. In the history, if we look back at the economic history, we can find a lot of platforms, let's say relatively low-tech platforms. So a market is a platform, a market where you have different sellers or vendors that are located in the same physical space, and basically what they attract is a lot of people, for instance, buyers or burglars or artists that want to make some money selling their pictures there, etc. So the credit card industry is an antecedent of what we know about platforms. What's important about platforms today is what we know about digital platforms. So using digital technology in order to perform this particular matching process, and this is precisely what we are interested in here. Okay, so what are platforms? We know that they are hybrid entities. So there are organizations, in some cases with for-profit interests, some cases for non-profit interests, some cases using very sophisticated technology, some cases using relatively low technology. Sometimes they are a firm, sometimes they are confused with a market. So having a uniform definition of a platform is a relatively hard exercise. We know that platforms have a particular role in the coordination of economic activities. They coordinate supply chains, business to business, business to consumers, so we have a lot of relationships going on in the platforms. They also serve as a way to connect suppliers to markets, and particularly important for small suppliers, so SMEs may find using these platforms as a very effective way to participate in markets where maybe big incumbents might be blocking the participation of these smart companies. They are used also to connect the users, and social media networks, for instance, are a clear example of how we can use these platforms to connect and to create value by means of connecting different people, and obviously also are important to enable transactions. So in principle, they are quite complex, quite hybrid, and quite heterogeneous. So why now? We are talking about the digital platforms now. Because they become a solution to relatively old problems in economics. And these four problems are related to search. So we know that for consumers, searching is costly. We know we have the traditional world, we go to a store, we don't find what we are looking for, we have to walk 100 meters away in order to find another store, and maybe just to find out that they don't have the item we were looking for, and then we have to go for another store, etc. So searching is costly. So doing search on the internet is cheaper. So we save a lot of search costs in terms of time, in terms of practicality of being at home and just connecting to the internet and being able to search. And obviously, we can finalize transactions also within the platform. So there are also reductions in the transaction cost. And all these triggers a modification of the structure of the transaction cost, and necessarily this impacts the economy. And we observe these changes that we were talking about at the beginning because of that, because there is a change in the relative composition of transaction cost. And obviously we should know that we live in a world where there's asymmetric information. And so solving the problems of asymmetric information is also important. And platforms are also very good at solving these particular problems. So basically what they do is they bring efficiency in interactions, in human interactions basically. Digital platforms are enabled by technology, okay? Broadband originally, then 3G, 4G, 5G now, and obviously digital technologies, AI. All these technologies obviously basically reinforce the role of platforms and allow that these platforms are increasingly more efficient every day. And obviously there are also ideas behind platforms, and particularly important here is the whole theory of matching, or market design, as the economists called it, because it's quite difficult to find a relatively efficient solution to match heterogeneous preferences on one side with heterogeneous preferences on the other side. So we need very sophisticated algorithms to solve that. So only when you have the technology and the algorithm, you're able to provide a solution which is more efficient than the previous solution, and that's precisely what digital platforms do. Obviously, by connecting several users located anywhere in the world, they can also provide a greater choice for users on every side of the platform. So product variety or service variety is increased, and also, this also has value. So this implies that these particular organizations are more efficient than the traditional firm or the concept of the firm that we have. And obviously there is a close relationship with algorithms and data. For the algorithm to work properly or more efficiently, we need a lot of data. So platforms are also able to collect this data and use this data in order to find better matching. So, and by providing better matchings, they provide more efficiency. And by providing more efficiency, they create value. But by creating value, they might be diverting value created by other actors or players in the market, and then obviously we have disruption, and in principle, we are all used to this concept. So what we know about platforms? Well, we know that they are quite asymmetric. We know that they have to solve what economists call the chicken and egg problem. So in order to reach some scale and be operative and be efficient, we need to bring the two sides on board, or three sides or four sides, whatever the size is. So how we do that? So normally the solution is by using prices. So we have to decide not about what the price I have to charge, but what's the pricing structure. And the pricing structure means that I have to decide on two prices, or three prices, on four prices, depending on how many sides the platform has, okay? So that's that's what explains why in some cases we observe that the price for some users is zero, because this is the optimal strategy in order to bring this particular side into the platform to be able to reach the critical size, the critical mass we need in order for the platform to develop, okay? There are also issues about coordination of individual versus collective decision-making. We know that many of these platforms fall. One particular explanation could be related to what Valerio just explained about first deciding the technology and then looking what's the problem that you want to solve. We also know that there are very few large European platforms. So if we compare with the US and Asia, particularly China. So the role of Europe is relatively small. And obviously there is a challenge in the regulatory context, okay? And obviously here you can see also an important list of things that we still don't know and that would be important also to understand. The problem so far is that basically all what we know about platforms is mostly theoretical and there is very little empirical evidence because there is no systematic data collection about data. So I will basically finish with a couple of ideas that we have been thinking about in order to be able to create a sustainable European platform ecosystem in the future. Okay, so we have to understand that platforms operate with a consumer good, which is basically based on information. And we have to understand the nature of this good, which is a public good, okay? So we need to take that into consideration when we are able to, or if we want to be able to design a sustainable ecosystem. We need to talk about finance, especially for allowing European platforms to achieve critical mass. We have to think hard on innovation incentives for platforms. We've been thinking and talking these 2 days about innovation, and I think we should also introduce the concept of platform in what we think about innovation and maybe also use platforms within the smart innovation, smart specialization strategies. We should also be aware of the welfare effects. So platforms are disruptive and are disrupting traditional firms or established firms, but what about welfare? So are we better off by having more platforms, or are we worse off? We don't know. So we might have an opinion about platforms that are good, that are bad, but we really don't know what's going on. We really don't know if we are better off with platforms or we are worse off. But what about consumer sophistication? So consumers can also be a little bit more strategic in their decisions and maybe create their own platforms in order maybe to counterbalance the power of big platforms. Why not? That could be possible. Okay, so we have to use also the technology on the other side of the market, let's say. There are things related to transparency, taxation, obviously productivity, inequality, so more macro-related issues that will become very important, and obviously, as related also to Cécile's presentation, norms and ethics in terms of market behavior and the type of attitudes or conduct that is acceptable and what's the conduct that is not acceptable. And if we relate this to competition policy, obviously we might have a sufficiently developed framework in order to be able to help some European platforms to flourish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nestor. The next presentation from Daniel will be more on the data part of the economy.
Great, thanks. I have a slide up there as well. So thanks for the opportunity to be here today and discuss these issues. I want to start by talking about a report that my think tank released last year. It was called The State of Data Innovation in the EU. In this report, it's available for free on our website, datainnovation.org. The point of this website was to look across about 25 to 30 different indicators, economic indicators in European countries, and assess which of the countries that are leading in the data economy and which are behind, and then assess how policies related to these different areas. In general, we were looking at 3 categories, the 3 pillars of the data economy. So the first is data itself. So data availability, we looked at a number of indicators there, particularly around open data, freedom of information laws, and the different means by which individuals could get access to different types of data, or companies could access to different types of data in different sectors. The second key pillar is technology. So in this category, we're looking at really the technological infrastructure that's key to the data economy, which of course includes everything from broadband or availability of computers to emerging areas like Internet of Things, or other types of technological platforms like use of electronic health records among primary care physicians, other technologies like that. And the third is really around people, the human capital and the firms and the businesses that are key towards driving innovation in this area. So, just our top-level findings, and so what we do in the report is we go through every indicator, we explain the rankings for each indicator, where countries stand, and some of the reasons for the leaders and the laggards. But in the overall rankings, which I have here, you see quite a lot of disparity. This is on a 100-point scale between the top 5 countries and the bottom 5 countries. So the top 5 countries here: Denmark, Finland, Netherlands, Sweden, and UK. Estonia at 6, obviously doing very well. And then, on each of the main categories, we also did a breakdown of who the leaders are. And then looking at the bottom 5, Greece, Croatia, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Cyprus. We kind of go through and you can see some of the key differences. So since we're here in Bulgaria, I thought I'd talk about some of the findings related to Bulgaria specifically and why it's on the lower side in this ranking. First of all, there's a number of areas where the country can do better, particularly related to what the government itself is doing. So some of the indicators where Bulgaria ranked the lowest was around, for example, e-government, government providing access to open data, and deployment of the Internet of Things, particularly in areas like smart ticketing, smart meters, and other government services. In addition, Bulgaria, of course, just again in comparison to other European countries, ranked lower on household broadband, both in terms of access and speed. It ranked lower in terms of business access to broadband. But one area where it did very well was in terms of the percentage of companies with access to very high-speed broadband. That was actually a very important indicator and one that Bulgaria did very well on. It also struggled in terms of use of technology in industry. Particularly, it was on the lower end for the EU in terms of use of cloud, bottom 5 in terms of use of big data. And then finally, in terms of workforce, this was an area where there were large opportunities for improvement, particularly in regards to the percent of ICT specialists in the country and data science skills. And obviously, this is a conversation that's been ongoing today when we're talking about brain drain and some of the other reasons for that. One of the interesting findings from here is really that there's so many opportunities for the countries that are on the lower rankings to improve. Particularly a country like Bulgaria, where a lot of the challenges were related specifically to things that the government can influence. It's harder to address some of the systemic workforce issues, for example, or education issues. You have to really get into the education pipeline, and that can take a long time. But there are some clear areas where the government can do more. And that brings me to another report I wanted to talk about, which is basically how do you address this type of challenge? And so we've done a number of reports looking at national strategies for various technologies. Our most recent one was looking at national strategies for the Internet of Things and comparing different countries and their approaches, as well as putting out a blueprint for what any country or region can do in terms of addressing these issues. So basically, if you're lower in your ranking on a particular use of a technology, how do you move to the top? And I think what's particularly interesting and relevant here to this conversation, I really like the analogy, Valerio, you were talking about earlier about the blue ocean, red ocean. I think definitely that analogy makes sense for new companies. I think one of the challenges for existing industries and existing sectors is they are in the red ocean right now, right? And they don't have the choice of necessarily immediately getting out of it. They're in highly competitive areas. And so the question is, how do they compete most successfully in those areas? And that's really through technology adoption. And so, the key part of national strategies in any technology you're talking about, whether it's broadband or AI, is it's about how can you increase adoption of the technology. I mean, it's great for any country that wants to be a leader in the development of the technology, but ultimately, success, in the economy, especially when you're talking about the traded sectors and you're talking about being in the red ocean for these different sectors, it's about can you leverage new and emerging technology more efficiently than any other region. And that's where there's some really big opportunities. So when we look at the opportunities in terms of national policies in this area, we break them into a number of areas. First would be funding. So obviously funding for just basic R&D in some of these areas, but a lot of the funding is about government adoption of the technology, kind of de-risking some of the technology by being an early adopter, especially in areas like smart cities or AI, where you can kind of prove some of the utility. There's also opportunities to do demonstration projects, pilot projects, or address key technological barriers such as cybersecurity, or as Cécile was talking about, explainability for AI. The government also has a very important role in terms of policy around convening and planning. So certainly there's policy that can be done around bringing together industry to develop industry-led standards, creating public-private partnerships around some of these technologies and the deployment. Also, a third area is government adoption. So actually, very strategically driving adoption in specific areas within government. For example, maybe updating government procurement rules around some of these emerging technologies where there's challenges, helping build some of the government platform technology. In this case, it would be the first definition that Nestor had out there of platforms in terms of the technology that you can build on top of. So a great example of this would be digital IDs and electronic IDs that are being used in many countries, especially in Estonia, for example, as really a platform for development of other technologies. Skills development, both in terms of data science skills specifically, as well as developing the greater ICT pipeline. Regulatory action, so developing a light touch framework, facilitating data collection, facilitating data sharing, and then trade policy. So addressing issues like cross-border data flows, pushing back on national standards that prohibit access to certain technologies, and ensuring open access to technology and industries. So then kind of going beyond that, I think kind of what are some of the, looking at the EU specifically, what are some of the challenges in this space? I think one of the biggest challenges that I see is that you need both policies that are focused on the demand side of the equation and policies that are focused on the supply side of the equation. And often, I think in Europe, there's a conflation of these two. So there'll be policies that are really demand-side policies, and I'll give you a specific example of this. For example, GDPR or some of the privacy regulations that are really intended. They're presented as promoting trust, for example. We hear that a lot. We heard that yesterday in some of the opening plenary session, and it's presented as if we adopt these policies, this will create greater trust in the economy, and that will lead to greater adoption. And what's left out of that presentation of some of these policy ideas is the impact that it has on the supply side. And I think this is an area where some of the EU policy has struggled and some of the specific national policies have struggled. So this is to say that there's a reason you might have better consumer protection for taxi riders, but if you don't have Uber, you've impacted the supply side, and that's a negative, net negative. We did a report recently looking at the impact of the GDPR on artificial intelligence within Europe, and our finding was that there were a number of provisions that were ultimately unnecessary for consumer protection, but they would have an enormously, it might have maybe a marginal benefit, but would ultimately have an enormously negative impact in terms of the supply side of AI and the adoption of AI within industry. And so this is, I think, kind of a critical part of the equation that we have to be talking about when we're engaged in this discussion. There's also, I think, just as it relates to smart specialization, there's an inherent tension here. On the one hand, not every country can be the best in the digital economy, right? And so that's not really the goal. But there are spillover effects, right? So there's enormous spillover effects that we see where it's rare to see a country get digital adoption right only in one sector. And so, that's where we have to think of the balance. Just like you don't have electrification, when you kind of go back, you didn't have electrification just for one industry. You had electrification for a country, and then of course within the country you specialize in particular areas, and that's where you had your success. I think we need that same type of thinking around many of these emerging technologies, whether it's the data economy in general or AI or the Internet of Things specifically. So let me just kind of conclude there. I think kind of the takeaway is pretty simple. You need less government and you need more government, right? So you need less government in terms of some of the regulation and some of the impact that it has on the supply side. But you certainly need more government in terms of driving adoption in a number of areas. And I think that's where there's a lot of really big opportunities, and it's an area where Europe has traditionally led the world. And if you look at areas like smart cities, this is why I'm coming from the United States. This is why so many in the United States are looking towards Europe for solutions, because they understand. I think European countries tend to understand better the value in piloting projects, the value in large government programs to push forward technology, and that's where there's a lot of learning on the transatlantic side that we're doing. So let me stop there. But again, thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. We start 15 minutes late, so I can take the 50 minutes that we lost from the previous sessions for some questions. I like your last statement about electrification is for all sectors, because this is something that is sometimes not very well understood. But in each sector we have specific differences in terms of privacy of the data, and so we need the two approaches, so what is a common and what is instead the sector specific. The example is a car data discussion today or health data discussion today. There are specific things that need to be addressed sector by sector. So I'm interested to see what you will propose in terms to have something that like the liability directive, for example, and then you have something on liability for self-driving cars. So how you are seeing these things?
Yeah, so we actually have a report that's going to be coming out at the end of May that's looking at what we call algorithmic accountability. So it's the idea that instead of just pushing for transparency or explainability, national, kind of preemptive regulation or regulations, there's been proposals that you have a commission, for example, certify, a particular algorithm before it's deployed. Our point is that all of these policy ideas are good in various avenues, but what you don't want to have is a comprehensive rule that says every important algorithm must be explained. Our point is that what you really want to do is get to impact, and there's lots of different ways to get to impact. And so we try and break down a regulatory approach that really focuses on consumer harm. So the idea is that you can have kind of post hoc enforcement, but that forces companies to ahead of time think about these issues and make risk-based determinations based on the type of harm that would be involved. So if you have a self-driving car and you're deploying algorithms that could likely result in serious injury or death, you're going to have a very different approach than if you're just showing someone this movie or that movie, and the harm is pretty minor and the impact is pretty minor. And so being able to differentiate that, and I think that gives companies the opportunity to have flexibility in what they're doing, manage their risk, but also improve as we learn and get better. I mean, the idea is that it would be a moving target. It's based on industry best practices, and as the technology gets better, the standards that we should have will get better as well. And so I think that's how we try and balance both the immediate needs of industry. And I think what's so important about that is when we look at AI and competition, it's a global race for AI. It's a global race to be who's the leader. And so, when you look at there's all these great demos you can watch of AI kind of versus a human, or showing how AI can learn. And what's so interesting is that, we start the early stages of AI versus the last stages of AI. The last stages of AI are, it's like an adult competing with a toddler on some game, right? The adult's always going to be significantly better. There's no competition. That's what we have to be thinking about when we talk about competition in industries right now. We can say, well, we're going to wait and get the rules right, but the risk is that another country's industry will move so far ahead that you won't have a chance to catch up later on, that you won't be at the table to play that second round. And so that's why I think it's so important that every country is really thinking about what are we doing with AI right now in our most important traded sectors.
Okay, thank you. And then I have a question for Cécile and Nestor, because from your presentation, we have clearly the feeling that Europe is fighting a global war against the US and China dominance in the digital economy. And we have a lot of unknown things. You mentioned that we need to anticipate changes in the labor market. So how do you see Europe really defending itself and protecting itself or losing other part of the economy that was showing the picture of Nestor?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. As I said, the important is to focus where we can lead, and we have some very strong strength and assets to build on. In terms of researchers, we have excellent researchers in some domains. Also, in the field of explainable AI, we might have a lead on that too, so this is something we want to pursue. Also on some technology like robotics, we're very strong, so let's capitalize on that and see where we can really lead. And also the industry, because there are so many good industry which could benefit from AI, and the question is adoption. So what can we do to help them adopting the technology, testing with them, see what framework to give them, to offer them so that they can adopt it. So see also not only the technology, but the regulatory framework. How can we use the regulation to help and not to hamper the take-up of the industry, of the technology in the industry? And in government as well, what can they already use? There are so many tools which are usable already and not yet used. So they are low-hanging fruit. We should really try to see how to help people and all industry everywhere. And this is also the goal of reaching and making the technology really available and usable. So it's not just putting things on the web and say, okay, they're available, help yourself. We really need people, and this is why in the AI on Demand platform, we need a layer of people making the transition between the technology and the user, because you cannot expect every SME to have an expert in AI. You need someone, some kind of translator who can talk the language of the user and say, okay, this is in your context what the technology can do, and these are the tools which can serve your purpose. So these are the different tools we are putting in place really to try to make a difference in Europe, and it's not in a catch-up mode, but to identify the areas where we have a leading edge and how to capitalize on that and making it happen. So that's basically the focus we have.
Nestor, we are not leading the platform, so how you can reinforce the European presence in platforms?
Yeah, in line with Cécile's intervention, I would say that the whole purpose of specialization, and particularly if you want to do it in a smart way, is to focus on your advantages. So identifying the areas where you have strong competitive advantages, and then reinforce those advantages, and not entering into arms race type of competitions worldwide, because then the consequences can be really very, very bad, in the sense that even if you win, you're maybe subject to the winner's curse, in the sense that so the whole effort and all the resources they have to put in order to win these particular battles then are more costly than the benefits that you're getting. So we should be a little bit more smarter. And also in terms of the platform economy, I think we need to identify areas or activities where European platforms can reach this critical mass and can be competitive at world scale, but not necessarily trying to imitate the Amazons and the Googles of the world. So there are a lot of activities that are going online. There are many opportunities, I think, where already European companies are performing very well. We have the case of Spotify, we have the case of Skype. So we need to focus on those areas, and with an European flavor, and provide these innovative services and products to the world, and see whether we can really leverage on the European level for those products to become adopted by the world, and then reinforce our competitiveness in that way.
Okay, thank you. There is a couple of questions from the, please, here.
I have a microphone already, so I'll start if you don't mind. We're talking about innovation and technology transform. Basically, this is kind of a process. And I sense, a lot of, I wouldn't say confusion, but kind of we're jumping from, innovation to competition quite a bit and forth. And the examples we are using, like a Skype, or the others from Estonia, these are basically kind of innovations, that are created, not really, I mean, they're successful at the end, but they came up as innovations. And the gentleman talking about digital platforms, you started saying that, we are kind of developing innovation digital platforms. It's, we are behind China and in India. And I'm not really too sure that innovation is like a zero-sum game. I think, on this kind of initial innovative thinking, and if we encourage education and research and also kind of awareness and opportunity and open-mindedness of people in Europe, this actually might drive, these initial triggers that hopefully with a different process and different support, that will encourage, us winning competition, that will be better. But I'm just kind of trying to see, this kind of complexity of the process from the idea, to basically kind of successful multinational. So, if you agree.
Yeah, well, there is a clear relationship between innovation and competition. So the more pro-innovation you may be, or the more resources you put in order to preserve competition, the more effects against innovation you may have. So the policy problem is to find the right balance between so promoting innovation and defending competition at the same time, which is something very complex. And especially in dynamic environments where everything changes very quickly, and your policy measures and your policy recipes of yesterday might not necessarily be ideal for today. Saying that, maybe we could look at also how very big platforms have been operating in the market, and basically what they do is every time there is a potential competitor, they simply buy it. And the business model for many of these developers of these ideas is to have a very good idea to be sold to Google or to Facebook, then to make a lot of money and then retire for a very easy life in the, I don't know, in a beach or whatever it is. So maybe there is an opportunity for European policy to support these particular firms and intervene to help them reach the critical mass and not disappear by absorption of the very big dominant platforms that are there.
Okay, there are clear signs that I have to close the session, so I invite you, if you have questions, just during the lunch break to talk directly with the speaker. Let's applaud again for their interesting statement. And please come back to this session at 2 o'clock, no, 1 o'clock, because there will be other interesting presentations.